Hello everyone, and welcome to another deep dive into the mysteries of history. Today, we are going to explore a story that has been taught in schools and churches for centuries. That the Apostle Thomas, one of Jesus Christ's 12 disciples, came to India in the 1st century AD. But is this story true, or is it just a myth that has been passed down over time? Let's find out. According to Christian traditions in India, St. Thomas is believed to have arrived on the shores of India in 52 AD. He supposedly founded the Syrian Christian Church in South India and was martyred in 72 AD by a group of Brahmins who were outraged by his preachings. In honor of his sacrifice, the famous St. Thomas Church was built near the place where it is said he was killed. But here is the thing. Modern historians believe that this entire story is based on a myth. So, what's the real story? According to reliable historical evidence, the Christian community in South India wasn't founded by St. Thomas at all. Instead, it was established in 345 AD, almost 300 years later, by a merchant named Knai Thoma, or Thomas of Cana. Knai Thoma was not an apostle, but a wealthy Christian merchant from Persia. He didn't come alone. He led around 400 Christian refugees who fled Persia due to religious persecution. They were welcomed by the Hindu authorities in South India, who gave them asylum. This is how the Syrian Christian Church in India actually began. So, how did the story of Apostle Thomas come about? Well, historians suggest that over time, people may have confused Knai Thoma's name with that of St. Thomas. This confusion gave birth to the legend that the apostle himself visited India. The names were similar enough to fuel the myth. It is a fascinating case of how names and stories can get mixed up over time, and before you know it, a legend is born. Interestingly, many Catholic universities in Europe have stopped teaching the story of St. Thomas coming to India as a historical fact. In those places, it is recognized as a legend, but in India, the story is still widely believed and taught as a part of Christian history. Why is this story still so strong here? Some people suggest that it is because it serves a certain narrative. By showing St. Thomas as a martyr killed by Hindu priests, the story creates an image of the Brahmins or Hindu priests as fanatics. This fits a certain perspective that is useful to certain groups. But there is more to this story. Earlier Christian missionaries in India were reportedly frustrated. Hindu society didn't produce any martyrs for their faith. In Christianity, martyrs, people who die for their faith, are often seen as heroes, and their stories help spread the religion. But in India, Hindu society was not interested in that kind of conflict. So, some historians believe that the story of St. Thomas being killed by Brahmins might have been invented to give Christianity a martyr in India. A powerful story that would help establish the faith in the region. And now let's talk about the famous St. Thomas Church. The church is often cited as the site of the Apostles' martyrdom. But historians point out that before the church was built, there were two important Hindu temples at this very spot. One dedicated to Jain worship and the other to Lord Shiva. These temples were destroyed by Christian soldiers and the church was built in their place. For the Christian missionaries, the presence of these temples were seen as a threat, a symbol of paganism that needed to be removed. But what we don't often hear about is the violence that took place to remove those temples. While we may never know exactly how many Hindu priests or worshippers were killed when the soldiers came to Mylapore, it's clear that the temples were violently removed. If we are talking about martyrs, some might argue that the real martyrs here were the Jains and Shaivites who lost their temples and their lives rather than the Apostle Thomas. In Hinduism, martyrdom isn't glorified the same way as it is in Christianity. But if we were to speak of martyrs in this context, the title might belong to those who worshipped at the Jain and Shaiv temples, who faced persecution and violence at the hands of the Christian soldiers. In the end, history is always more complicated than it seems. The legend of St. Thomas is a powerful story that has shaped religious belief in India for centuries, but this historical evidence tells a very different tale. So the next time you hear about St. Thomas in India, remember that what we often believe as history might just be a story passed down through time. Who knows what other myths have shaped the history we know today.